I'm a small business, do I need an employee handbook? And if I do, how do I create one?
Okay, so it's like the Bible for businesses. Everybody asks this, oh, I've got to have an employment manual. And, you know, you can have an employment manual. It should be extremely comprehensive. It will cover everything from holidays to snow conditions, whether you can get into work or not, maternity, paternity, adoption leave, discrimination, all of those kind of things. And a comprehensive book. I've seen them run to several hundred pages sometimes. And I think to myself that really the people involved in putting that together, you know, needed to get a better life. The reality is the first point of call that I advise all of my clients on is to consult the ACAS guidelines. And ACAS run a really competent site. So when you're making mention within a letter of employment and things of policies, you know, the referring people and referring staff to the ACAS guidelines, which are considered to be fair in tribunals, so they're really the textbook version, gets rid of the need for a substantial part of any employment manual, because they deal with paternity leave. It's the basic bare minimum. If you want to add to that, then create your own policy for that particular area. So, for instance, if you wanted to pay people full pay for the first 6 months of their sickness, because you're running the kind of business where you can and you think it's important, then fine, create your own policy for that part of it and enhance from the ACAS guidelines. But realistically, it saves you an enormous amount of time. It's considered fair, you know, and unchallengeable in tribunal if you followed their guidelines. Everyone knows where they are. And if there's any changes to the law, then that's automatically updated on the ACAS website.
Okay, what is their website address? Do you know that?
Yeah, it's acas.org, and easy to find, easy to use. So I think it saves particularly smaller businesses an awful lot of time. They know that they're safe and secure if they follow those guidelines. So there are, however, some policies which are becoming increasingly important, because some people will ask you for them and they won't do business with you without them. So an example of that would be modern slavery, equalities, and that leads me to one thing that I'm coming across more and more at the moment is ethical policies of businesses, because that tends to frame the whole of their staff relationships. So I think those ones, employee handbooks, yes, everybody needs to have clear authority as to how they're managing their relationships. You know, it's a lot easier. You know, if they introduce a kind of guidebook for marriage, for instance, you know, it would be quite a good idea. Well, they've got that for employment. It's there, it's free, it's an excellent site, and so use that really rather than creating your own. If you do want to create your own, you know, there are a number of precedent banks, I call them, where you can get legal precedents which are up to date. You know, a company called Simply Docs is one of those, very cheap, I think, for a year's subscription to their employment section, £35. So, you know, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. If you're looking for that for individual policies, or you're looking for what you should have in those things and you want to create it, then you could create it with a lot of time for about £35. So, you know, in some ways it's something and a nothing. Use the ACAS guidelines, create policies where you want to be different from those basic guidelines, or where there's a need to do so.
So can you download things from the ACAS website so you can have them?
Yep.
Yeah.
ACAS, you can, yep.
And you could create your own little bank of them then?
Yep, you can, or you can just refer people and then you follow the. They even have precedent letters for disciplinary things and examples. So there's kind of considerable reassurance. And don't forget that at the current time, it changes from time to time, your employees don't build up substantial employment rights for the first 2 years of employment. So, you know, the one that overrides that is discrimination. So discrimination in any of the protected areas, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability and things. So if you've got staff members who fall into those categories, always as an employer be very careful. Make sure you follow the ACAS guidelines.
Okay. But is it law to have an employee handbook if you have employees? No.
No. And a lot of people make the mistake. They think, you know, if I'm an employer, my staff have to have a contract, you know, which is the basic, you know, first document that you're going to give anybody, really.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is no. There's no legal right to have a contract. There's no legal requirement. There is a legal right to have what's called a statement of terms, and that basically lists out your holidays, whether you're in a pension, how much you're paid, where you're working, those basic factors, right? Every employee should be given one of those within 2 months of starting. And the reason for that is that it's compliance, but there's a penalty, because if you don't issue it, the employee can go to an employment tribunal and basically ask for you to give that to them and claim a week's pay because you haven't given it to them. So if there's
Right. Okay.
you know, so those basic things, I think there's about 10 factors, you know, which is where you work, pay, those very, very basic things that everyone wants to know. Yes, you should give them that, but you don't have to give them a contract. You don't have to give them a staff manual.